I'm going to play you a little bit of a recap of where this conversation was headed, and then we pick up about that. We've been examining, really coming from Christmas, how Christianity in itself is something you and I have grown up understanding to be a part of us. And I think for most people in Zimbabwe, Africa even at large, we have grounded and founded our identity, our belief systems in Christianity. And to some extent, we've been forced, and perhaps it's a little bit of a struggle, to put to the side our traditional values and beliefs. Ndakawagorera uchitiwe kwenya muchasungirwika nokuti makati kwaya azvindira nebhaibheri asi yeyorora yenyu yerusambo neini yemunoita asi zvimwe munoita muchisiya. And I've got to imagine that some of us, to some point as Africans, there's a little bit of a conflict in as far as merging these two ideologies, these two beliefs coming into hand. And we've been learning over the last few weeks how even our African traditional beliefs themselves are incorporated in our medicine, in our philosophy, in the way we do things. Kupatsanura uchiti ndoda kuisa mongo ukubhonzo racho sara ukuchinyatsoona kuti mongo ibhonzo nezvizvi. It may not be as easy as that. Let me start off by introducing our panel, and then I'll play you a little bit of a recap as to where we left it off, and then we're going to go straight into it. In the studio today, we have got Pasta. Sorry, I don't know why that happens. Pastor Tinashe Zinyemba. If you may remember, he's a theologian and he's also an author of books. He's also an entrepreneur, very passionate about business. Good morning.
Good morning, FoLake. Good morning to all of the listeners.
And also joining us in our conversation, our regular guest, Joshua Maponga. And I'm sure you heard him the other day on our sister station, one of the most interesting, others will say controversial, most heated, most opinionated, and on top of all that, he is a teacher. He's an expert in African tradition and culture development. And I like to tease him a lot and call him Bishop because there is a story on top of many other stories that he has. Good morning, Joshua. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning and hello to all your listeners out there. And nice to be here again.
And never last and in no way least, we have our Pan-African activist, also known as an Africologist, Menzi Maseko. Mangwanani kujozi kukuriseko Menzi.
Mangwanani bagwetu. We are well. We give thanks for the sunrise.
All right.
And for the rain.
Indeed we do. So I'm just going to play a little bit of a recap of where we were headed the last time we were all in this room together. And then we'll take it straight from there. Take a listen. You know when we say we eat flesh in Christianity.
But there's no flesh. There's no flesh. Look,
it may not be literal, but the principle is understood, isn't it? That there's a reason why it's referred to as flesh and the blood of.
One thing.
Miss the principle of sacrifice that you gave as an example to say it's better because it's Jesus and not Menzi or Joshua.
Even the offering is occultic, even the offering.
And that's sacrificial. For me,
which African ritual requires?
Yeah, Menzi just asked a question. Menzi, do you want to repeat it for him?
Any culture, any nation. Which ritual in African tradition requires human sacrifice? Because I've never heard of it.
I can't hear you.
Avangobvunza kuti kana takatasa chivanhu mabelief system edu mungatipa here muenzaniso werudzi rinotarira izvo zvokuti munhu unofanwa you sacrifice a human being, their blood or their body. Can you give us an example which African culture actually does that and practices this? You must sacrifice a human being.
So,
which African culture?
That's witchcraft in the
Okay, so that's a little bit of a rewind to where we had. We'd moved a little bit away from that, and Fundisi Tinashe had come in, but I also play this for your benefit, Fundisi, so that we can go a little bit back. And the last time we were talking to you, when you were also in South Africa, it sounded as if Joshua and you were clashing, but you actually just couldn't hear us.
100%, yes. And I apologize to Joshua last time in the studio, and apologies to all of the listeners.
So it's great for you to be in the studio so that we can really hit this ground running. So the last time we were discussing this, we had gotten to a point where the issue of ancestry had joined the conversation. Because primarily you find, as far as Christianity is concerned, and African traditional beliefs, there is a great divergence there. And I think Mfundisi, when Joshua was also in the studio, he was challenging you very deliberately about your understanding of what ancestry looks like. And I want to pick your brain a little bit about that in as far as ancestry is concerned, if you allow us, so that we can track this conversation together and connect it to where we need it to be. When you understand ancestry, in as far as our African belief system is concerned, where do you think they stand if they were in hierarchy between God, man, ancestors, or witchcraft, or mediators, spirit mediums? Where do you think our ancestors would be placed in this conversation?
Sure. Thank you for that. You know, this is the challenge that we have. If we were to look at things with a particular lens, we can easily lose focus. There's at one time when the Apostle Paul is preaching, and he mentions and he talks about all of us as human beings. God created every human being from one blood. There's no human being that's got blue, green, yellow blood. We all have red blood. In fact, the color of our skin is just one small aspect of a human being. It's just melanin. That's all. Why I'm saying that is to say the issue of ancestry is not unique to Africans. It's unique to human beings at large. Concerning African issues, here as I sit here in the studio, I cannot negate the fact that I've got ancestors. I've got them. In fact, I represent them. I am because of those that were before me. And in actual fact, whatever I do now, if I do it dishonorably, I am dishonoring those that lived before me. The challenge that we have now in African religion is when we begin to consult the dead. My ancestors, the ones that lived, who resulted in me being here, are dead. They are gone. When I am to go and consult someone and say, I want to speak to those that passed away to discover what must I do about my life, and the spirit sits upon a spirit medium and says, I am your father, I am your grandfather, I am this, I am that. That is not my ancestor. That is not my ancestor. It's a spirit, but that's not my ancestor. And the challenge that's there now, we assume that that person who has come upon the spirit medium is my ancestor. There is no correlation between the dead and the living. The life of my ancestors is in me. I can't deny what's in my blood. And for me, I would like to challenge my elders who are here. As an African, I honor them. My brother, Elder Menzi,
Joshua,
Elder Joshua.
Yeah.
If you go, the white people, they've got what's called ancestry.com. You can just Google, and there you are, you discover your ancestry. However, in our African tradition, if I want to find out my ancestry, I've got to go somewhere, Ndombera, Makadise Guru, and I'm told all these stories. Why don't we document these things? Number one. Number two, sometimes there's no information that's released. I mean, I've been on a number of panels, some public, some private, where I'm with spirit mediums and I'm interrogating, and they're interrogating me. The narrative of ancestry, it's not that if I die today, I automatically become an ancestor.
Correct.
You have to qualify.
Correct.
You have to qualify.
Yes.
It's not everybody who qualifies.
That's it.
Have you been living right? Did you have debts? Blah, blah, blah. Why
Did you
is
commit
that
suicide?
Yes. That narrative is not mentioned on public platforms like this because it now points to my issue with regards to Jesus Christ.
What do you think the function of ancestors, according to you, Mfundisi, is in our African tradition?
It has to do with culture, understanding who we are, our values. And when I'm saying the role of ancestors, I think we should have done more writing of who we are. Unfortunately, when the white man came and colonized us, he told us everything about us was bad, which is not correct. Because me, right now as I'm here, I am an ancestor to be. Okay, my role.
If you qualify?
No. I mean, at some my children will give birth and so forth. My point is,
okay,
I need to be able to pass on right traditions to my children. They then pass them on to their children.
Okay,
and that's how I'm becoming an ancestor in that regard. Then they can say, you know what, this guy who lived some hundreds of years ago called Tinashe Zinyemba, he did right for our lineage. That's the role of someone who is alive. So today, I am creating a narrative. So the role of ancestors is to create a narrative that the next generation picks up from. But when they die, that's it. They don't have any role in this world that we are in right now.
Okay. Do you think as Africans we think our ancestors have supernatural powers? According to you, do you
According
think
to
that's
me.
how we are perceiving it, as if our ancestors have supernatural powers?
I think it's an element of ignorance. When you don't understand something, you then assign something to it. You assign some role to it. That this thing, the reason why things have gone this way is because of. It's just an issue of knowledge and understanding. I, as an African, as I said, I'm an African proudly so. I think most of what we do is perfect and 100%. As I said, number one, for me, African culture is number one. Our challenge, and this is what I'll push and advocate the gospel of Jesus Christ, is when we interact with the spirit realm. It's at that point where we're at a point of departure.
Why is it easy to accept Jesus to play the mediatory role with a higher power and not your own ancestors? Because when we look at the definition of an ancestor, Jesus very well might as well be a true ancestor. Even when we look at the principle of the Bible, it is also very deliberate to list the lineage and to explain ancestry. Jesus himself is the epitome of an ancestor. Why is it so difficult to grasp for Christians that actually Mbuya wangu can actually play the same mediatory role as well as Jesus, who, by the way, Mbuya wangu ka is a much closer connection, because Jesus is abstract to us, to be very honest. Asimbuya wangu wachivi vabhutisi
The direct bloodline that's there to them direct.
indina vangu vaitozwa vaiti vakadhakwa vaida sadza rezviyo saka anonzi mazhazviyo.
Okay.
It's a much closer connection than the abstract idea of a Jesus. Why is it difficult for us to accept that even our own natural ancestors can also mediate the same way we expect Jesus to mediate?
Thank you for the way that you've asked it, because you've used the word mediator. So I'll answer it in two ways. Number one, the issue of a mediator. Why is there a need for a mediator? In all human beings, whether you're black, Asian, white, whatever the case might be, there is something called depravity. We are all corrupt, somewhere, somehow. You're left to yourself on planet Mars or Pluto, you are going to be sinful there by yourself. Because it's a corruption. So my point of the mediator now, I want to speak to God. I want to speak to a righteous God, a holy God. I don't know how to because of the corruption in me. So this is the role of the mediator. They play that role of being connecting me to my maker, my creator. Now this mediator has got to qualify. This mediator must be straight and right in the eyes of the God supreme. This is where Jesus Christ comes in, number one. Number two, which is where I wanted to say what makes Jesus the ultimate. Look, fruit is fruit. A mango tree produces mango trees. And a tomato tree produces tomatoes. Now, if you talk of my ancestry, as in my grandfather, grandparents, and so forth, going backwards, I have no idea the quality or the kind of life that they lived. I do not know. And I can inquire and speak to them and say, please help me in this particular area. But if we were to talk about Jesus Christ, from the time that he was born, died, rose again from the dead, up until now, he has been proficient in terms of the quality of the product of Jesus Christ himself, universally. If a white man is to come right now and say, I want to consult God, can they speak to my grandfather? If an Asian, can they speak to my grandfather?
Why do they need to speak to grandfather?
My point is the issue of a result. That's what I'm trying to get to. However, white, Indian, black, whatever you might be, Jesus Christ answers. So at this point, to try and answer you in a nutshell, I'm trying to say that he qualifies. He disqualifies everyone else. Then number two, as I mentioned at my first point, the issue of a mediator. I want to speak to my God. The realm we're in right now, there are fewer people alive on earth compared to those who were before and those who are yet to come. We are in a very small window. So there are more people who have died and there are more who are yet to come. So in this time that we have got right now, whether I live 80 years, 60 years, 70, 30, 40, whatever it might be, it's a very small window. And I'm supposed to achieve something. In order for me to achieve whatever purpose, goal, agenda that has been prescribed to me by God, I need a mediator to grant me access to God Almighty. And we cannot rule out the fact of evil. Evil is there. There is a deliberate agenda against my life, your life, the listener's life. So it's not like we're just living in the clouds and so forth. There are agendas we're supposed to fulfill. There is a life we're supposed to live here on earth. And this is the role of the mediator in order access and so forth. So not to take time from everyone else, but I thought I would speak in that way.
So And when you were not here, I think Menzi covered that, because he then explained, and I know Menzi, you're on the line probably itching as well, saying, I've already said this. It's interesting that we're talking about how you're giving the impression that even us as Africans feel inadequate to approach the supreme being. And that's not necessarily how we feel, that we are corrupt. African belief system does not have the idea of that we're perpetually sinners. That's not how we see ourselves as Africans. This is a concept that came with Christianity. We don't the idea of us having a mediator to get to God is not because we are perfectly inadequate and that we are sinners.
I'm saying me as a person, individually. I mean, look, I'm not talking something that's out there. I'm just saying, like, by yourself, even when you wake up in the morning, you can say, I forgot this.
Yeah.
There is an innate corruptness in every human being. It's there. Look, not everybody is a murderer, not everyone is a rapist, blah, 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 and so forth. But that ability in the presence of God, when you are in the presence of any being that is supreme, you sense your inadequacy. It's there. You can't deny it.
Yeah.
So all I'm saying, that's the role of the mediator. He steps in. It's like an advocate who knows the protocols of the heavens.
Menzi, why do you presume the idea of a mediator from an African belief system is necessary? Why do we actually need this mediator between the divine, whoever we classify that divine to be?
Greetings, everyone. Thanks to the pastor there. The way I look at it, I really wanted to focus on the word values in this discussion. The issue of mediators is, I can clearly say, debatable. It is a subjective thing. It's not objective. No one can objectively say, well, people can say it because they've bought into the belief system of being a Christian. They say Jesus Christ is perfect. But Buddha is perfect to the Buddhist. Krishna is perfect to the Krishna consciousness people. Vinimangi is perfect to the Nguni people, right? Alegba is perfect to the Yoruba people. Yemaya is perfect mediator to the people who practice the Ifa in Nigeria, for example. And we can go on and on. In every single race in the world, each and every one has either their medium or their avatar or their so-called Messiah. Muhammad is perfect to the Muslims, right? He is the only one who is worthy to bring forth the word of their God to themselves so that they can regulate their lives. But as I said, I want to focus mostly on the issue of the values. Christian values are not alien to Africans. The Christian values I'm not talking about Christian dogma and Christian rituals and Christian things that have been constructed by the Roman Church, and when they decided to hijack a cult that was formed by people in Palestine, right? So the Christianity, there are so many different variations of Christianity because of that schism that happened in the Council of Nicaea, and even just before that, right? The Constantine and all those things. The Christians know that. They know that history. But it's not a history that they fail to acknowledge, because within the values that were added by the Roman Empire to Christendom, to create Christendom, that became an empire building bloody, I'm using the word bloody on purpose, because there's a lot of murder that ensued after that, by Christians killing people that were not Christians. So there's a whole lot of values that were there in the original Christianity that are not, that are no longer, that have been mixed up with the Christianity that we have today. Hence, there's so many sects. Everyone thinks they are right in their own mind. Hence, there are so many denominations and everything else. But the values of I will not kill, I will not kill. We've said this many times in these kinds of conversations. Those values come from ancient Africa, because Christianity in its original essence also, before it was even called Christianity, when it was just Nazarenes or people who were, followers of the sun, it comes from the followers of Heru, who were followers of the light of this world. Before the story of Jesus was even narrated, there was Heru, the ancient Egyptian. Before Heru, there were similar kind of avatars in Kush. There were similar avatars in ancient Congo. You know, I'm taking this back all the way to Inzalo Yelanga, which is here in Southern Africa. Inzalo Yelanga means the birth of the sun. There's a space where original African people shared certain values of righteousness and connection to the Creator through their rituals. And they did this in a place called the birth of the sun, because it was a cosmically aligned place at a particular spot in Southern Africa where most of humankind come from. I say most because there are certain species that were born elsewhere, that were created elsewhere. You know, the three cradle theory, it's called. You know, there's the African cradle and then there's other. So I'm giving you a historical analysis to say that the values are human values. The values about human beings wanting to have a relationship with their Creator. Values of human beings trying to make sense of a world of good and evil. Things that are happening that may be construed as evil, things that will be construed as good. And then we form laws, we form what is it called? Principles. So generally, if you look at things, the essence of it is not different from any African value, but it's also not different from any ancient Indian value. What will differ is the process by which people go there. The Christians believe Christianity is the best way. Christ is the one. You know, when I, as an African, as a Pan-Africanist and an Africanologist, don't believe that Christ is the one, and that's okay. You know, and there was a time when we could tolerate each other with that, but now because of the authoritarianism of a Christianity born out of empire, people want to believe that you have to believe this way. The only way to God is this only way issue.
Right.
That's where the problem begins.
Right.
That's where intolerance and bloodshed begins.
And this is a question that baffles us, Mfundisi. Kuti isusu as Africans, we are extremely tolerable of anything and everything. That is part of our Ubuntu.
Part of our value system.
It is. Sure. Why is it difficult for us to also accept that it's actually okay to accept that Christianity and the concept of Jesus and him being the only way is coming with
that's because others feel like they have to save someone. They believe that there's original sin.
Right.
It's innate. My brother mentioned already that's
right.
Innately corrupt.
Yeah.
We don't believe we're innately corrupt. We believe we're innately divine because we are children of God.
Yeah.
That's what we believe. We are children of nature.
Right.
And God created nature. And we come from that nature.
Yeah.
Our inherent nature is good, not corrupt. That corruption comes when it is put in your mind that there's such a thing as sin. One of the ancient names of the Nguni Bantu people is called Abangoni. It means the blameless ones. It's something that you can trace etymologically through many different languages. It's inherited in our Ubuntu. It's inherited in many of our things.
Yeah, and so when we talk this way, yeah,
it's a foreign thing.
It's a foreign thing, and this is the thing. If we think about it as Africans, we are accepting that God is God. In fact, to me, it sounds more sensible to accept that we were made perfect because God made for us to be perfect. Adam na Eve but it makes sense that we are.
Who teaches a child to lie? A child who doesn't know much anything, who teaches that child to be naughty? As a parent, when you've got a little baby, you know, when you're not at home and they're with the carer, whether it's a grandparent or a maid, they're fine. The moment that you open the door, your child starts acting funny. And people say, but she wasn't doing this all day.
Yeah.
That's the corruption I'm talking about. I'm not talking about being evil. I'm saying we need God. This is why we are seeking God. So the evil, yes, is taught and so forth. And secondly, we need to understand that, look, no one has got exclusive rights on God.
But do you accept that when God created life, there has to be a divine principle of balance, hot, cold, wet, dry, good and evil? It's got nothing to do with your ability for God to accept you. It's just a natural balance that has to exist.
Correct, but that's not God. You see, God is ultimate. What you're talking about now is in a lower dimension because you're talking about positive and negative. So if you talk about positive and negative, then we can then assume that we've got God and the devil.
Okay.
That's not the case. We've got God, and then the devil is a lower being. So it's not positive, negative. Positive, negative is in creation, not in.
The devil is the son of God. The devil is the son of God.
God change what I'm saying.
The devil.
He doesn't. Okay.
Not African God.
Let's call him whatever you want to call him. All I'm saying is, if we talk about God, God is perfect. Okay, so there's no balance of light and darkness. If you talk about God, God is ultimate, He's perfect. Light and darkness are in the realm of creation. Okay, positive, negative is in the realm. It's a lower dimension.
Yeah, we're out of time. And we were just getting there. I actually wanted to ask you a question, Mfundisi. We saw Pope John. I know, I'm so sorry. We really out of time, like less than 2 minutes. But I was going to say, Mfundisi, we saw in 1982, Pope John II, when he went to Benin, actually apologized. And he was apologizing to Africans at whole. And he was apologizing for how, African cultures had been ridiculed by the Western world.
Correct.
In your understanding, why do you think the Pope felt the need to apologize to African cultures by accepting and acknowledging that perhaps we have been ridiculed and minimized? But now you can't even answer that. This is the sad thing.
Like I said,
you can't even answer that. You can't even answer that. But this is a question I'm planting.
Okay.
And then next
I
week,
hope I get a chance to answer.
No, you definitely will get an answer to answer.
You can't get a chance twice.
And Joshua, you will also next week when we start with
him,
we'll start with you, Joshua, because you're listening.
I also want him to think about it.
Not a problem. I'm here. I'll answer it all.
We will.
Yes.
We're just out of time. We've got 10 seconds. We've got to go to the news. But thank you so much, gentlemen. What I loved about this is how, Menzi, you said African culture is probably the most divine. The flawless ones. I loved that. It is Capital 100.4 FM. We've got to go to the news. We will catch up next week again. Thank you so much, Mfundisi, Joshua, and Menzi for joining us.
FoLake on Harare's Heartbeat. Capital 100.4 FM.
The Capital Crunch.